Hi there, my name is Sue Nelson, and I'm the founder of Breakthrough Funding, which I founded 6 years ago. And then we were bought by EY just over a year ago. We're now EY Incentives Limited. And I set up the company specifically to get R&D tax relief back for amazing, small, innovative companies. Unfortunately, I'm on a bit of a mission. So unfortunately, so many small businesses, particularly in the digital arena, don't apply for R&D tax relief, either because they think they're not eligible or, I'm not really allowed to say this, their accountant says they're not eligible when in fact they are. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. And that's why I call it the UK's best kept business secret, because it's about getting cash back for you being innovative. So let's see if you can tick all 5 boxes to see if you're eligible. First of all, you probably have to be a limited company. If you're a partnership, sole trader, charity, public sector, it's unlikely. It's possible, but it's unlikely that you'd be able to apply. So if you're a limited company, you're okay. You need to have been trading for at least a year. That is to say, you need to have got to the end of your first financial year and have spent money on the development work, so then we can claim it back. You don't get it up front. Probably very unlikely that you have 500 people or more. So if you've got less than 500 people, you can apply. And if your turnover is less than 100 million euros, I'm sure some of you in this room are in that bracket, which is about 85 million pounds a year, you can't apply either for this particular scheme. So I'm sure that's fine. The key, of course, though, is, are you working on something new and different? And are you pretty sure that somebody else would like to steal what you're doing? Because it would be too painful for them to go through it themselves. So we'll explain exactly what new and different means in a minute. But if you can tick all those 5 boxes, you could well be eligible. We write a thorough report for you that goes to HMRC, and that explains how you meet the relevant legislation. And to be honest, that's about 80% of the work involved. We don't ask you to fill out forms. We don't ask you to write anything. We sort of interview you really just to see and really get underneath what it is you're doing, what we can apply for and what we can't. And I guess what we do is we write your story. That's what we do. We write your story. After that, work out the money and resources that you've already spent. It's better to do it this way round and not look at the financials first, because we don't know what you've been doing that's relevant. So if we can understand your story, we can then work out only after that how much money you've spent on that and what resources you've put towards it. So who is eligible? 10 years, 2 years, developing something with your team. You haven't quite gone to market yet, but you have spent a lot of money doing it. You are still eligible. We know that you have to have less than 500 employees, and mostly the stuff that you're doing has to be self-funded. So you have spent your time, your energy, your subcontractors, your staff, freelancers, developing something that a client hasn't paid for. So if you are, so I think, Alan, you're a digital agency. If a client has come to you and asked you to develop something and is paying you to develop something, you can't claim. They can though, because they're paying you to do it. So it has to be self-funded. You can go back 2 financial years, and that's your financial years, not the end of the tax year. So you can go back 2 years, but you can't go back after that. So if you have been going 2 years and you haven't applied yet, and you think you're doing innovation, you probably do need to get a bit of a wiggle on. You can't claim capital items generally. So if you've got machinery that you've bought to develop something or equipment, you can't claim for that. And if you're a digital artist or a digital creative, I'm afraid you can't apply for stuff that's aesthetic. So for example, if you're looking at designing a website and you're making it look amazing, you can't get R&D funding for that bit typically. However, the back end, if you've got amazing functionality, you can. So you can't get money for the aesthetic stuff, but you can for the sort of technical stuff, if you like. You can claim salaries of your employed staff if if they're working on it. And that includes the employer's national insurance contributions, pension contributions, bonuses, and anything like that. And also the salaries of people supervising them. So what we find is that often people will go, yeah, we've got Bob over there, he's a developer, and we've got so-and-so and so-and-so. But they forget that the people who are not necessarily developers themselves, but are managing them, are giving up their time to manage that project. And therefore you can put a proportion of their salaries in too. If you're using subcontractors, and that includes anybody across the world, you don't have to just employ subcontractors in the UK. So typically, quite a lot of people use Eastern European developers because they're so talented, or sometimes in India or other places abroad, you can still claim the money that you're paying them, but only 65% of the cost. I can explain why if you want, but I can't be bothered really because it's a bit complicated. But basically, you can put in all of your, salaried people, and 65% of what people are charging you as subcontractors. If you're using prototypes and you don't then go on to sell them, or if you're using any other consumable items, then you can claim for those as well. So how do you know what innovation is? So it's something that requires brain power and expertise, and it's usually about solving problems. And I think what I find, or why I think people in the digital arena don't apply for R&D tax relief as much as they should, is because they're solving problems all day. So because it's their day job, they don't really think that it's R&D, when actually the classification inside HMRC, it is R&D. So for example, you could be looking at making a process much faster than your competitors. So you could have deconstructed a process, worked out how to do it in a much quicker, more efficient way, and that would be considered R&D. You could look at making something far less complicated than the norm out in the market. Typically in digital as well, it's looking at new functionality. So that could be writing really interesting code to do some functionality that nobody's done before, or in terms of hardware, any new functionality that you're doing in terms of any hardware you're developing. Also adapting to new technology. So new technologies are being rained on us all the time, and then you might find that what you're doing is a little bit behind on the market, and therefore you've got to adapt to that new technology. Anything that you're doing in that respect is eligible. And of course, I always think of this about like when you go to IKEA and you buy some furniture and you just lay it all out and like, I don't know how to put it together. It's the same when you've got a variety of software and hardware. So you could have something proprietary, like an Excel spreadsheet and some other software and maybe some hardware. It is still R&D if you're putting those things together in a new way, even though you haven't invented those different bits of software and hardware. And the reason for that is you just don't know how they're going to react and work with each other until you put them together. And therefore, anything around that is called system uncertainty, is generally eligible. And obviously, a lot of us at the moment are trying to develop services and products that are much more sustainable. So if you're working on trying to cut out certain elements to make it more environmentally friendly or fit into a much more circular economy, then again, that's using quite a lot of brain power to change what you're doing. Oh, that's a good bit of, sorry about that, bit of formatting. I'm going to give you some examples, and the best way to give you examples is to ask some of our audience. Alice, is there anything that you're doing that you would like to know, or one of your clients where you go, I wonder if that's eligible?
So we're the Joyful, we're a brand and marketing consultancy, and we are developing the Joyful Academy. So we're designing training programs for business owners to access our services at a cheaper rate. So we're trying to kind of condense the bespoke work we do into online and group courses.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of main question I had was whether that would be.
So again, I'm generalising because I don't know the full detail of what you're doing, but in general, the content of the courses wouldn't be eligible. That's called humanities, already. However, if the underlying way in which you're making those available, so people accessing them or anything like that, or if there's any sort of literally code you're writing underneath to make all that work, that possibly could be. So it's, again, it's the back end of that. So if you're saying, well, how do we get somebody to interact with that? And then we want them to, once they've done that training thing and they've got a certain percentage pass mark or something, how do we then get them to do this thing? And how do we, and it's if it's different and new and you've got guys writing that, then that would be the eligible bit.
Okay, so if we design our own course platform,
the platform would be, not the content of the course. And then I think you've got 5 staff. So if you've got staff working on it, then we'd put in their time. And if you've subcontracted some of that out and somebody's sending you invoices, that would be eligible. And then a lot of companies say, oh, we don't do timesheets, so we can't really work out how much time we spend. Especially when it's your first or second time, HMRC do not expect you to have amazing records because you didn't know. What we ask you to do is do a really reasonable, fair, honest guess at how much time you think somebody's spent. So if somebody's spending 1 day a week, it means we can put in 20% of their salary. And that's all we need, that's all we need at that stage. If you are constantly applying for R&D tax relief year after year, I think HMRC quite reasonably would expect you to have a bit more of a scientific way of measuring it. But it literally is, well, how many days a week does this person spend? Or, well, they spent 3 months doing that and then they went on to the day job. So that's how we would do it. You don't have to come up with some huge formula.
And is this something you always apply for in retrospect?
Yes. So unlike a grant, which you get in advance and then you use it, you have to have spent the money before you can apply. And therefore, that's why you have to get to the end of your first year. And then we go through the accounts. Because the way you apply for it is through the corporation tax system, which again I won't bore you with, but that's the way that they reimburse you. And if you're not making a profit, in general, that means you would get that back in cash. If you've got forward corporation tax that you need to pay, it would reduce the amount of corporation tax you pay. So in a way, again, probably not allowed to say this, but in a way, you're sort of better off when you're making a loss because you get a big wad of cash. Alan, is there anything you're doing in your digital agency that you're thinking, oh, actually, I think I might be eligible?
I'm really disappointed to hear you say that the clients would own any kind of product or development, but because that was one of my questions actually, and I just got into a big contract wrangle with one client about they really wanted ownership of everything, and I said, well, if we develop something that we think is reusable elsewhere, but they were like, no, we want it. And that was my initial thought.
Yeah. I think you really need to talk about Clive about that, because he'll help you tie up your contracts so somebody can't do that in the future. Because intellectual property is a really, really important part of what you're doing if you're a new agency. So you absolutely need to talk to an IP expert before you do any of those things. In general, I would find with agencies that a client will pay mostly for some of the work, development work. And actually what a lot of agencies do is they say, this is a really good thing, and actually I want to offer it to other clients, and therefore I'll fulfill this contract over here, but I have spent way over, above and beyond what the client's paying me for, because I want to develop it internally, and then I want to sell it on later to clients. So the bit outside the contract would be self-funded, and therefore it may be possible to look at what you spent on that and see if we can claim for that. Sometimes we used to call it Google time. Sometimes in agencies you allow staff half a day a week to play around and develop stuff. If they're constantly looking at innovation, then that's claimable. But the great thing about your client being able to claim is that if they can get roughly a quarter back, that subsidises what they're paying you. So you saying to them, do you know that what I'm doing is I'm so amazing, by the way, Mr. Client, that actually this is innovation, and do you know that you can apply for R&D tax relief for my work? It subsidises their bill for you, and it's a good selling point. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, and say, I'll take a cut, from what we've saved you. Clive, yeah, exactly.
The example here of like a learning platform, would R&D constitute, for example, I understand doesn't involve the course content. You were talking about the actual platform, so if they were putting time and effort for example, into mock-ups and user experience and stuff like that? Is that really classed as
Yeah,
R&D?
user experience particularly, because you know, I think when you're very digitally savvy and experienced, you believe that somebody's going to navigate a system in a very particular way. But of course, as soon as you test it, people aren't. And user experience, I think, is classic R&D, because you fail all the time and then you correct it and you correct it. So if something's not logically simple to solve and you're failing and then getting there, that again is R&D.
Does that mean that I can retrospectively class all my user experience work as R&D?
We'd probably have to have a really, really good look at it in detail, but Ed is sitting behind you and he'd be delighted to have a look at that for you. Because what we would do is look at what is eligible and what isn't. Because there's no point in putting stuff forward that's not eligible, because they'll just chuck it back. So Ed would be delighted to do that, I'm sure. Clive, you represent a lot of your IP specialists. Another plug. Please get your IP sorted out and protect yourself if you've started your business. Are there any of your clients that come to mind where you think, I wonder if that's R&D?
Definitely, and thank you for the reference from Alan. The answer to you is licensing. It's an easy solution. We can chat about that later. But I have a lot of clients now who are early stage startups, and that's why I'm here, because many of them want to go the licensing route, multiplying their training, their education programs, products, and many of them spend time and money on product design before they start trading. So my question is related to what is the technical aspect of being 1 year trading? Do they actually have to be selling product in order to claim?
No. They have to be developing it. And I think the reason is this legislation's been going since the year 2000. I suspect, completely unproven, I suspect it was set up for the pharmaceutical industry, where there's a lot of experimentation going on, and then some of those developments would never see the light of day. They wouldn't pass, in order to go to the public. So it's not about what goes to market. It's about the innovation that you've done. As long as it's not for you in a personal sense, as long as it has a commercial driver, even if you spend 2 years and then you have to abort it, you can still claim for that product.
Just on a supplementary basis, so I spend more and more of my time now on design registrations for innovative processes, for especially service-based organisations, who create a particular way of delivering a service. Could the costs related to that be paid
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah. So processes, again, are eligible as well as a product. So the best way I've got of explaining that, I suppose, is a factory that I went to that processes nuts. We get to see amazing people, and it's huge. This factory, it makes a lot of peanut butter and all sorts of other things. And this factory had been there for 50 years, and it was just completely inefficient because it had grown over organically. And so the lorry delivering the nuts would be over there, and then the people processing it, then they'd have to take it, and it just. So what they did is they spent downtime. They reworked the process of how they would work it through the factory, where they should put different things, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, the time that they took to make their business more efficient from process was eligible because it was a really difficult problem to solve. And I think particularly in the digital space, what we're trying to do is look at how can we do this more effectively, more efficiently? How can we get our clients in particular to go online, and the touch points are much easier to deal with, and we can shorten that process. So it's not just about digital innovation, it is about processes too.
Great, thanks, Sue.
Alice?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I've been helping someone set their business up, and they are a kind of process, operations, logistics consultant.
Yeah.
So does that mean she could potentially say to her clients, you can claim this R&D tax relief for the work you're employing me to do?
Potentially, I love that word, because it's difficult for me to say for sure, because I don't know what they're doing. But yes, and I think, again, in the sort of digital side, particularly for your agency side, you forget that your clients can claim, because what you're doing, they're paying you to do R&D, and therefore you're one of these subcontractors that they can claim. So, but again, Ed's here. you can always just ring us and say, would that work? Would it not? And we'll just tell you over the phone. But yeah, definitely. Reefer, any other questions? Oh, Alan's.
There was something about, on one of the slides, about you can't claim for machinery, but you can claim for prototypes.
Yes.
And I just think some of the prototypes would be might be machinery.
So by that I mean big things that do stuff, because that is capital on the balance sheet. So that will be on your balance sheet as a piece of capital equipment, and therefore you'll get tax write-offs in another way. When you're making prototypes, yeah, it could be robots, it could be robotics, it could be something that you're building, but it's not a piece of machinery you've got in to make something. It's a prototype that you're making. And if that prototype doesn't consequently get sold on, it's just your prototype that you keep. Any of the materials that you use to make that would be eligible. So even the nuts and bolts and anything that you do. Another weird one, we had a client who makes fudge, another great factory that I liked looking around, and they get tons of sugar delivered literally every day. But they do have a new product development section where they're, I don't know, trying to make vegan fudge or gluten-free fudge, or putting alcohol in it and it won't gel properly, and all sorts of other things. And they could claim a percentage of the sugar they were using. It's quite difficult to calculate because they were using that bit of the delivery for their prototyping. So it's not just nuts and bolts and things that are quite obvious. If you're in the food and drink sector, it could also be ingredients that you're using, that you're wasting, I would say, in order to get some prototypes right. Reefer, did you want to add anything else?
I think this is a good time to finish. So thank you so much, Sue.
Pleasure, and I presume we'll have some contact details. And again, we're very, very happy just to give you an off-the-record analysis if you just want to ring us up, because it is quite difficult to navigate.
Thank you so much.
Don't forget to apply. Thank you.